tell you what happened in these studies. Like, so for instance, in a study with elderly people, so kind of, 60s, 70s, they showed with MitoQ over 6 weeks at 20 milligrams that there was a 42% improvement in flow-mediated dilation, so increased blood flow via nitric oxide. And what this means, and Doug Seals, actually the researcher who did this study, said about that was it was like seeing people reverse their vascular aging by 15 to 20 years. So I think that's really impressive because, yeah, he's been looking at this kind of measurement for a really long time, and he's just seen that, yeah, over different decades of aging, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and there hasn't been a lot to fix it. But MitoQ seemed, far and above, the best kind of mediator of better flow-mediated dilation that he'd seen. So that was really exciting. The same study, he also saw improved artery flexibility. So that's also, I think, important because that means that you'll have less chance of hypertension. I was also shown in that study that there was less oxidized LDL, and everyone knows LDL is the bad cholesterol, but the reason why it's the bad cholesterol is because it is most likely to get oxidized, and then in an oxidized form, it can attack your vessel walls, your blood vessel walls, and then over time create foam cells and create plaques and cause all sorts of issues leading to cardiovascular disease.
Hello, Dr. Mitchell. You are the Chief Scientific Officer at MitoQ, a company that specializes in cellular health to improve Healthspan. So welcome to Modern Healthspan, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So maybe kind of as an introduction, could you talk about what is the problem that MitoQ is trying to solve?
Yeah, so the problem is that as we age, our mitochondria start to dysfunction. And though, people don't often think of mitochondria as a big thing to address while they think of chronic diseases of aging like heart disease and diabetes, there's actually a lot of evidence that mitochondria are responsible for the origin of many of these diseases of aging. And so our company is really about trying to have people understand that mitochondria might be the thing that you address as you start to notice, other sort of symptoms of aging, that even though you can always have, a clinical biomarker that sort of indicates mitochondria might be at fault, the data coming out from not only animal studies, but also human studies really indicates that mitochondria could be the thing that helps you the most. So our company is really about developing mitochondrial supplements. So we have this proprietary patented supplement called MitoQ mitoquinol, which I'll describe in a little bit, which is all about protecting your mitochondria, because we believe if you protect your mitochondria as you age, you will then protect yourself against all these aging diseases.
So if we look at the mitochondria in a bit more detail, so what is going wrong as we age?
Yeah, very good question. So everyone knows that mitochondria are the powerhouse of our cells, and it's also really well understood that mitochondria are where we are having the most vulnerability in our cells. And this is because oxidative stress is being made while you make ATP the main currency of the cells. And so it's this problem of aging where, as mitochondria, are having more and more demands on energy or have various insults happen to them because of environmental insults or just other things going wrong in aging, then oxidative stress also starts to build up in mitochondria. Mitochondria start to dysfunction. And if you have dysfunctioning mitochondria, obviously you have less ATP, less energy to run the cell, and also more likelihood of the cell dying and other things going wrong in your organs. So we really try to emphasize the fact that even though oxidative stress is often addressed pretty well in the mitochondria through various endogenous kinds of mechanisms, we think that there's a really strong need to have something extra for the mitochondria protect itself against aging, because there's a lot of clinical evidence showing that oxidative stress, especially mitochondrial oxidative stress, is increasing while you age. And things like mitochondrial DNA damage, cellular DNA damage are also really apparent. And also ATP production going down as you age is also really apparent, especially in organs like your brain, so high energy use organs, brain, muscle, heart. So we're really about how do you protect the mitochondria from all that oxidative stress, especially when I would say, the mechanisms that usually protect it start to go down, and no one's really found a good way to address those yet.
So what are the mechanisms that would normally protect it? So yeah, I mean, it's generating ATP by generating these, I guess by moving electrons around and protons around it, and this generates reactive oxygen species. So normally these are quenched in some way. And
Yeah.
who is doing that?
Normally, yeah. I mean, evolution has given us lots of systems to help us with keeping oxidative stress at a minimum. And so, for instance, we have superoxide dismutase, we have glutathione, and then we also have CoQ10. And CoQ10 has two roles actually in the mitochondria. It's there to help with the electron transport that you just described, but it's also there as a very strong antioxidant that especially helps with lipid peroxidation. So lipid peroxidation is when the actual mitochondria membranes are being attacked by those free radicals, the oxidative stress, and start to incur damage. If you have damage to your lipid membranes, your mitochondria, then you actually don't have the right kinds of energy being made anymore because you need intact lipid membranes to have the oxidative phosphorylation, the energy production occur. So we're really, actually, I would say most focused on CoQ10 is something that is going down during aging. Many other systems are going down as well. So SOD, as I said, glutathione is going down. Another enzyme called catalase is also decreasing during aging. But in particular, we're aware that CoQ10 goes down as you age and also seems to decrease with various chronic diseases like heart disease, like diabetes, various immune dysfunction. So we're really about trying to preserve CoQ10 function. And this maybe is a good segue for me to describe what MitoQ is. Can I describe what MitoQ is? Yeah. So MitoQ was invented about 25 years ago by two scientists in New Zealand, Mike Murphy and Robin Smith. They were trying to figure out, okay, with the understanding of CoQ10 decreasing as you age, and also the problem of oral CoQ10 is not really very bioavailable, very effective. I know there's a lot of different kinds of forms out in the market that say they're extremely bioavailable to the bloodstream at least, but the real problem with CoQ10 is it's not bioavailable to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria are a special organelle in the fact that they're very protected against having transport of various exogenous substances. So a lot of things can go out of the mitochondria, not many things can go into the mitochondria. And this is the case for CoQ10. There's no good way for oral CoQ10 to get inside the mitochondria. There's no specific transport system for it. So this is a problem. And in fact, when people look at how much CoQ10 you can get into a cell, and then also the mitochondria, they see that CoQ10 maybe can get into the mitochondria around 10%. So not very much. So Mike Murphy and Robin Smith designed a new form of CoQ10. So they knew about this special kind of tag, a mitochondrial-targeted tag called triphenylphosphonium. And this tag happens to be very positively charged. And the mitochondria happen to be negatively charged. So they understood that if they attach this triphenylphosphonium tag, often called TPP, onto basically any substance, this would allow that substance to get drawn into the mitochondria because of the negative charge of the mitochondria. So they took the active part of the CoQ10 molecule, so the ubiquinone, and they attached that TPP tag on. And then they showed that with this new form of CoQ10, and just to be sure, it's really a different structure than CoQ10 in lots of different ways. So it has this tag on it. It also is a shorter structure than CoQ10. Um, and so they called it mitoquinol. And when they made mitoquinol, they then tested it to see how well it could get to the mitochondria, and they could see that it could get to the mitochondria up to 90%. So a vast improvement on just regular CoQ10. So that was, I think, the big breakthrough of just understanding that there are a lot of supplements out there that say they're antioxidants, but not many of them can get into the mitochondria very well. So this was the game changer. And I would say it's been really incredible seeing how much research has now been done on mitoquinol. So over the last 25 years, we've had 25 clinical studies being done on it. We've had over 900 research papers. And as I said before, this is probably because people are realizing more and more that mitochondria might be at the very origins of diseases. And it's kind of making sense, especially when you think about the mitochondria as being, as I said, one of the most vulnerable areas of the cell, the place with the most damage occurring to it because of the oxidative stress. So I could tell you all the different sort of benefits of MitoQ in terms of that research, but I don't know if there's any special research you want to hear about.
I do want to go into that. Yeah, I mean, so mitochondria are well, mitochondrial dysfunction is one of the hallmarks of aging. So it certainly is agreed that the mitochondria misbehaving is one of the key things that's driving aging. Okay, so we have the MitoQ, which is it's similar to CoQ10, but not well. Actually, it performs the same oxidative stress reduction job as CoQ10, right? But it doesn't handle the part in the electron transport chain. So you still need CoQ10. Is that correct?
This is correct. So just so it's clear, when they're inventing mitoquinol, they're really inventing it to address antioxidant capability that was going down, because of the lack of CoQ10. For sure, you still need CoQ10 to have electron transport occur. So I would say, we know that CoQ10 is going down somewhat as you age, but it's still being made. So for instance, in the case of statins, so probably a lot of people are taking statins in your audience. It's well understood that statins decrease the amount of CoQ10 that your body can make, but it's not making it so that your mitochondria are having any extreme dysfunction, right? So you still have enough CoQ10 to have, yeah, most of your function, but I would just say that extra protection, which is what we think is really important as you age, is the thing that you actually still need to address. And that's where MitoQ has been shown to have a lot of different ways of addressing that dysfunction. So protecting it against dysfunction, I should say.
And you compared MitoQ to CoQ10 in terms of their ability to quench reactive oxygen species, I believe. Was this in vitro or in vivo? And can you talk a little bit about what you saw there?
Yeah, so there's been several in vitro tests, just really looking at the bioavailability of MitoQ versus CoQ10. And so it's, yeah, as I said, been shown that MitoQ is much more able to get inside the mitochondria at a faster rate. And this is really, I think, clear in vitro. For in vivo, it's a little bit more difficult because the one thing is that you can't measure MitoQ through a CoQ10 test, right? It's a completely different molecule. So it's a little bit challenging to actually isolate, organ tissue from humans and look at mitochondria levels very easily, because as you're preparing the mitochondria, the MitoQ is sort of leaking out. It's just challenging. So that's been something that we've been working on. We actually have a study that we think we can hopefully publish this year. But we do have studies showing that against CoQ10, in particular quinol, MitoQ does seem to be better at addressing oxidative stress. So a study that was published a few years ago using 20 milligrams of MitoQ versus 200 milligrams of CoQ10 showed that after 6 weeks, MitoQ was better able to decrease mitochondrial oxidative stress, so in particular hydrogen peroxide. And it was also better than CoQ10 at increasing just endogenous antioxidant defenses. So for instance, It increased catalase expression. Catalase, as I mentioned before, is another endogenous mitochondrial antioxidant that is, especially upregulated during exercise, for instance. So one of the reasons why exercise is so good for you is it promotes antioxidant defenses. And so catalase, SOD, so superoxide dismutase are some of those. So we do have evidence that MitoQ is actually operating in ways that CoQ10 can't in the mitochondria. And just to make it clear, where this was being looked at was in the muscle, right? So we were showing that MitoQ is not only able to get into the muscle and the mitochondria of the muscle and help with that oxidative stress, but CoQ10 just really wasn't doing anything. So we thought that was really important because we know that a lot of people are looking to CoQ10 as a way to address muscle dystrophy with statin use, and also with exercise performance. But we think that MitoQ is a better solution for that. And in fact, we have a study where just 10 days of MitoQ, so at 20 milligrams, we saw that MitoQ could increase peak power in terms of muscle output and also increase PGC1 alpha, which is a sort of metabolic master switch that promotes mitochondrial biogenesis, which, as you're probably aware of, like as soon as you start to exercise, the main benefit of exercise is you're increasing your mitochondria. So like elite athletes, for instance, have usually 2 to 3 times more mitochondria than someone who's not an athlete. And this is able to, not only, of course, make them better at exercise, but is also a longevity factor. So yeah, you're probably aware, of course, that VO2 max is a great longevity indicator, right? And I always try to remind people, yeah, it's a great longevity indicator because it's all about making your mitochondria work better. And really, when you start to see VO2 max go down, it's also an indicator that your mitochondria are starting to have problems as well.
Yes, we were talking to Dr. Tarnopolsky about that, who is he looks at mitochondria as well, and his thing was, how do you measure that your mitochondria are working? Well, you measure your VO2 max, and
exactly, yeah,
because you yes, as you say, without a tissue biopsy, and even then it's difficult to actually see, are my mitochondria doing anything, or are they working best? Okay,
yeah.
so what if we look at kind of at the physiological level, right? You've run a number of tests, a number of studies looking at how MitoQ helps at a physiological level. So I think one of the key places where the CoQ10 is required is in heart function. So what have you seen in terms of MitoQ and heart function?
Oh, yeah. So good question. We have had about 7 different clinical studies looking at various aspects of heart function. But I would say the most replicated, so I think replicated at least 4 or 5 times, has been looking at flow-mediated dilation. And this is probably maybe a little bit of a new concept to some of the people who listen to you. Flow-mediated dilation is a way to measure, I would say, the very early origins of cardiovascular disease. So way before you start seeing plaques or anything else happen in your vasculature, what is happening with your blood vessels is they become less and less reactive to nitric oxide, right? So we all know nitric oxide release is really important for vasodilation, for getting all the blood to all your vital organs. And what's happening as you age, you actually have less nitric oxide release and less flow-mediated dilation. And so flow-mediated dilation is basically compressing, various arteries. And then when, you open up that artery and allow blood flow to go through, you should see nitric oxide release very much accentuated, right? To kind of get as much blood going again. If you don't see that, then that's a sign that your vasculature is showing those really early stages of damage. And this is a problem because your vasculature, so your endothelial cells, the things that line all your arteries and your vasculature and capillaries, they're extremely vulnerable to mitochondrial oxidative stress. And if they get too much oxidative stress over time, they become less reactive. They can't make as much ATP as they should. So they can't generate that nitric oxide release that I just told you about. So just to tell you what happened in these studies, so for instance, in a study with elderly people, so kind of, 60s, 70s, they showed with MitoQ over 6 weeks at 20 milligrams that there was a 42% improvement in flow-mediated dilation, so increased blood flow via nitric oxide. And what this means, and Doug Seals, actually the researcher who did this study, said about that was it was like seeing people reverse their vascular aging by 15 to 20 years. So I think that's really impressive because, yeah, he's been looking at this kind of measurement for a really long time, and he's just seen that, yeah, over different decades of aging, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and there hasn't been a lot to fix it. But MitoQ seemed, far and above, the best kind of mediator of better flow-mediated dilation that he'd seen. So that was really exciting. The same study, he also saw improved artery flexibility. So that's also, I think, important because that means that you'll have less chance of hypertension. I was also shown in that study that there was less oxidized LDL, and everyone knows LDL is the bad cholesterol, but the reason why it's the bad cholesterol is because it is most likely to get oxidized, and then in an oxidized form, it can attack your vessel walls, your blood vessel walls, and then over time create foam cells and create plaques and cause all sorts of issues leading to cardiovascular disease. So what I think was really cool about this study was just showing that even people who seemed healthy that didn't have any diagnosed cardiovascular disease, they were still showing problems with their vascular function. And this could kind of turn it around and even sort of reverse the aging of it, quite substantially.
Okay, so it's improving the vascular flexibility.
Yeah.
So as you would measure by pulse wave velocity, like so that would
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was
okay.
seen in terms of aortic flexibility, but then this flow-mediated dilation is a little bit different because it's about looking at nitric oxide release. So that was another thing that they're really trying to understand is we all know that nitric oxide is really important to maintain vascular health. This kind of response goes down as you age. How do you keep it as good as possible? So yeah.
Right. So when you said it reduced oxidized LDL, so would like the LDL measure that you get from your doctor, would that have gone down or would that not show the difference?
I think what's clear is that we have indications that LDL goes down in other studies, but we think that what people sometimes miss is that it's not just LDL per se, it's this kind of reactive form, this oxidized LDL that is really problematic. So we believe this is something that people will start to, get more of an understanding. Like, so for instance, a few years ago, no one had ever heard of ApoB before, and now everyone's heard about it. So yeah, we think that oxidized LDL is something that people will start to really focus on because we know that everyone just sits around and waits to get diagnosed with heart disease and didn't think about it really, really early on. And we've got all these different kinds of technologies that still help us look at the early stages, like clearly, like looking at calcification, things like that. But even before calcification, you can look at these things like flow-mediated dilation, oxidized LDL to get that sense.
So I see heart disease. So you have heart disease. So one of the issues, of course, is the vasculature that we've just talked about. But the heart muscle itself also has a lot of mitochondria, and CoQ10 is
Yeah.
important to them. So have you actually looked at the function of the heart muscle in any tests?
Yeah, I would say it's difficult to look at per se mitochondrial function of human heart. So there's a lot of preclinical studies showing that MitoQ can improve actual heart function. So for instance, preclinical studies showing that it helps with atrial fibrillation, which we know now is, much more likely to be because of mitochondrial dysfunction. But that's still, I think, waiting for a clinical study. We do have other studies with people who have cardiovascular issues showing improved mitochondrial function in their white blood cells, which I think is super interesting because it's really clear when you do have, heart disease, you're going to have a lot of inflammation and your immune function is also going to be compromised. So it was fascinating seeing that MitoQ can actually increase oxidative phosphorylation and also improve, obviously, oxidative stress in these immune cells in people with, heart failure, basically.
Could you talk about that a bit? Because the immune system, that means jumping from heart to immune system,
Yeah,
but the immune system is so important. So if
yeah.
if we can help improve that or maintain its ability, that's really important.
Yeah, and I think this is another really interesting area about mitochondria. So everyone, as I said really early on, knows that mitochondria make ATP, they make energy, but mitochondria are also very heavily involved in immune responses. And so just to give you a sense of how they do that, so you're aware that mitochondria used to be like a whole separate kind of cell way back 4 billion years ago. And so mitochondria are now kind of, I would say, like a signaling mediator of stress. And this is where mitochondria, because they have such high energy needs and they're a vulnerable place, makes sense is that stress mediator, because if anything's going wrong with the mitochondria, the cell is probably also going to need to change its tune to start doing things differently. So there's a lot of indication now that when mitochondria is distressed, it creates an immune cascade. So for instance, if you have a high release of oxidative stress from mitochondria, if you have mitochondrial DNA being released from mitochondria or mitochondrial proteins, this starts this cascade that brings on what's called an inflammasome. An inflammasome is often called also a cytokine storm. So I think people have heard of cytokine storm as when your immune response has gotten a little bit crazy and you've generated a lot of cytokines like, IL-6 and TNF alpha, and now they're wreaking havoc on your body. And, there's also indication that, for instance, immune dysfunction can be mediated by mitochondria in the brain as well too. And this could be one of the reasons why Alzheimer's disease is occurring, because basically amyloid, people are now understanding, is an immune marker. So it's something that gets released because of immune response. So it seems more and more clear that mitochondria might be responsible for the way that amyloid is produced because of this immune response. So for sure, mitochondria are really important for our immune responses overall, and especially this term called inflammaging, which I'm sure people have heard of before, this idea that there's this chronic inflammation that's causing havoc to all our organ systems and causing accelerated aging. Mitochondria, if you can address the dysfunction, can then decrease a lot of inflammation. And I will say that we've had many clinical studies show that. We've had studies showing that, for instance, MitoQ decreases F-isoprosteins. So this is a very highly inflammatory molecule. Also, it decreases MDA, so malondialdehyde, which is another inflammatory molecule. I would say it's more and more clear that if you can keep inflammation at bay through the mitochondria, that's actually better than just addressing inflammation per se, because you've addressed it at its sort of central, I would say, very early origin.
So, kind of going back to VO2 max, and so I guess the mitochondria in the muscle, because we talked about that, that was one of the best ways of measuring how good they are. So, have you looked at sports performance, or I guess any kind of performance? But sports would be one way, but I guess also the 6 minute walk test or something would also count.
Yeah. I mean, different situations. Yeah, mitochondria, I would say, are surely known as a great way to improve your exercise performance, and MitoQ has been used to do that in several studies. So I mentioned this study where MitoQ was used to increase peak performance, peak muscle output in middle-aged men. It's also been shown to improve performance. So once again, peak power in, I would say, professional cyclers as well too. And in fact, we've seen, though this is unpublished, that VO2 max is improved by MitoQ in elite cyclers that are based in New Zealand. This is not something that is probably going to get published anytime soon, but we would love it if we started to see more people look at VO2 max, because we've had a lot of anecdotes that MitoQ does improve VO2 max. But besides that, we also understand that MitoQ can just literally improve your performance. So in a time trial, it can improve your overall time. It's also good for muscle recovery. So we think that's also really interesting to indicate. So when people are doing high intensity exercise, a lot of people aren't aware you're causing damage to your DNA. So when you do high intensity exercise, like day after day, you are causing damage to your DNA, not only in your nucleus, but also your mitochondrial DNA. And what was shown was that just after 3 weeks of MitoQ, that all this high intensity exercise that was causing DNA damage was now mitigated by the MitoQ, which allowed exercise to, be performed more, I would say, efficiently. So just overall recovery was better. And that's what we hear, especially from elite athletes, that when they have had a hard day or when they've exercised super, super hard and they've probably caused a lot of damage, they take MitoQ to make sure that they can bring themselves back up to a good sort of training status.
Have you looked at, actually, have you looked at 6 minute walk test or elderly people with, I guess, healthy but elderly with MitoQ?
Yeah, so we have a trial that's going on right now that will look at that. So we have a trial that's using MitoQ to address frailty. And for anyone who's not really clear what that means, frailty is actually a diagnosed syndrome where you not only show physical frailty, so you have trouble walking, sometimes happens when you get older, but you're also showing cognitive frailty, so you're having memory issues. So we have a trial right now going on at University of Connecticut, looking how MitoQ can address not only that mental frailty, so improve cognition, but also improve 6 minute walk tests, things like that. We do have published studies going into sort of more diseased populations, showing that MitoQ can improve the 6 minute walk test in people with heart disease, for instance. But yeah, we're still waiting for that study to get done. We have a lot of different studies that are underway. We have over 20 different clinical studies that we're currently waiting for results on.
Yes, I saw that you have all these different studies. So, how many of them are you funding, and how many of them are where, like, a university or some other organization has reached out to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question because unlike a lot of supplement companies, we don't really fund hardly any of our studies. Instead, we have a program called the Mitochondrial Collaborative Research Program. And I would love it if anyone listening who's interested in mitochondrial health or wants to research mitochondrial health to go look at our website. It's kind of separate from MitoQ. It's called mcrp.dev. And through this MCRP program, we provide mitoquinol free of charge to look at all sorts of different applications of it for, diseases, as I said. So everything from diabetes to just, improved exercise function to improved energy. We're really curious to see what people come up with because, for instance, we've had a lot of MDs come to us and say that they've seen MitoQ works better for statins, for instance, than CoQ10. But we're still waiting for someone to come and say, we want to do that study. We are a small supplement company, so we can't really fund much on our own. But I guess the good news is because of this MCRP program, we've had over 300 researchers just basically fund their own studies to look at MitoQ because there's such a huge interest in mitochondria is a way to combat, aging in general. So we find that a lot of people are just excited to use MitoQ to see what it can do.
Yeah, and in some ways that's better because it means that it's totally independent. Like the study is totally independent. You're just providing the supplement. So
Exactly.
one thing you mentioned in there was it was diabetes, and I saw there was one study that showed that it reduced insulin resistance. So
Sort of. So just to
how
give
did
you a
that? Yeah.
sense of what was going on in that study, it was a study looking at people who are pre-diabetics who did not have diabetes yet, but were kind of on that path. And what they wanted to understand was mitochondria something that seemed at the very sort of start of diabetes pathology, so insulin resistance, as you say. And they did this by giving these pre-diabetic patients a really large amount of lipid, right? So they kind of mimicked what could happen when you eat a super high fat meal like a pizza or have like a big piece of cheesecake. And people don't understand this, like even just one big amount of fat entering your bloodstream actually can cause lipotoxicity. So it can cause a little bit of insulin resistance occurring just from that one big high fat meal. So they were trying to understand, is that happening? So they gave that big lipid challenge, as they called it, and then they gave MitoQ in quite a high dose, so 80 milligrams. Don't try this at home. But they saw that that 80 milligram dose acutely preserved glucose uptake. And that's really important because without the MitoQ in the placebo group, they saw that glucose uptake was actually compromised. And this is just a sign of, over time, you keep on exposing your body to too much fat. That high amount of fat can cause mitochondrial dysfunction through making more oxidative stress. And that makes it so this glucose uptake doesn't work as well. It basically makes it so the transport of glucose, so this glucose transporter called GLUT4, is no longer working the way it should. So it was really interesting, I think, because that study just showed, once again, that people are kind of missing maybe a key way to prevent diabetes, which is through the mitochondria. But it's early stages. It was not something that was really about insulin resistance. It was just about, how can you keep glucose uptake intact?
So I believe your background is brain.
Yes.
I
The
guess
PhD in neuroscience.
in
Yes.
neuroscience is neuroscience, and the brain is full of mitochondria. So
Yes. Yeah.
have you looked at any benefits for cognition with MitoQ?
Yeah, we're starting to do that. And it does make sense because the brain is a really high energy organ. And we know that any kind of loss of ATP production can very similarly compromise brain function and lead to things like pathology of amyloid, kind of build up things like that. So we have, for instance, a study that is ongoing that has already started showing in healthy older adults that memory is improved with MitoQ. So that's really exciting, but that's a study that's probably not going to get published until next year. But that's already been seen in healthy populations. I mentioned that study in cognitive frailty, so we're excited to see that because that's going to show what MitoQ can do for executive function, for memory, for mood, many different things. We have studies also in ALS, in multiple sclerosis, and schizophrenia. We also have another interesting study looking at neurovascular function. And this is another thing that I think people don't seem to be aware of, is that a lot of dementia is caused by poor neurovascular function. So basically, for instance, we know that people with hypertension have a much greater risk of having dementia. So anyone with vascular issues, the fact that they're not going to get blood to the brain is going to, in the end, cause damage. And so what this study is doing is looking at people who are healthy. They have maybe a little bit of metabolic dysfunction, but they're trying to understand, all right, can MitoQ preserve neurovascular function? So it's preserving all that blood flow to the brain, which, yeah, as I said, is something that people are just missing, is another way to protect your brain against aging. So really excited about that as well. That'll be coming out, I think, next year.
Yes, the blood flow in the brain is so important, and yeah, people don't realize that, or it may not be top of mind. The eyes, but the retinas also have. I think the retinal cells have the highest mitochondrial count. Uh,
Yeah.
have you done anything on eyes? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we have this MCRP program. If anyone wants to come and offer to do a eye study on anything, we'd be happy to talk to them. So far, right now, we have about 12 different preclinical studies showing that MitoQ can be very powerful for especially age-related eye diseases. So that's what we have right now. I would say you're right that the retina is very, very vulnerable. And for sure, there's more indication coming out every day that age-related macular degeneration is caused by mitochondrial dysfunction because of the fact that the retina is getting, so much UV radiation. It's, yeah, something that has to kind of stay intact for life. And that's really challenging, as you know, because, it has this high energy need all the time. So we're excited to see what could happen if we actually had a clinical study in that as well. We had anecdotes, people saying that they've had better kind of, overall vision and things, improving about their vision, but that's just anecdotes, so hard to say from those.
Are all these are all the papers from these studies collected in a single place? Is it on this website or on your website?
Yeah, we have a lot of them on our website, especially our US website, so mitoq.com. I would say another great way of finding all these studies is just going to PubMed and typing in MitoQ. As I said, we have over 800 studies just in all sorts of different things. Like you wouldn't believe it, like from skin health to, we even have a clinical study going on right now looking at like urinary health. So for instance, I did not realize this. Apparently, as you age, you have a lot of issues, I guess, with urgency, need to urinate many more times than you used to. And this is also mitochondrial mediated, perhaps. So I was like, I did not know that. That that's possible. But yeah, like now there's some indication of that in preclinical studies, and now there's a clinical study going on looking at that. So I find that really fascinating, that the things that you don't even realize that mitochondria could affect.
So turning to kind of protocols. So how much do you take? When do you take it with or without food? What would a protocol for MitoQ look like?
Yeah, so you just said something very important. MitoQ is very bioavailable. As I said, we have proof that it's more bioavailable than CoQ10, at least getting into the body. But the big thing is that if you take MitoQ with food, you will decrease its bioavailability. So we always recommend that people take MitoQ on an empty stomach. So usually first thing in the morning, you can have any liquid you want with it, so coffee, tea, whatever you want, but just wait at least 30 minutes before you say have breakfast or any kind of like big meal. So that's, I think, key. Otherwise, we have a commercial dose of MitoQ that's around 10 milligrams. And we think this is really good just for maintaining health, protecting against general aging, that sort of thing, like helping with fatigue. We have a lot of people telling us that MitoQ really helped with fatigue, especially towards the end of the day. Um, if you have more health conditions, something that you really want to address, we recommend a 20 milligram dose. And in fact, we have like this practitioner pack that has a 20 milligram dose that I think is been shown to be very effective. So that's also what we say. We also caution people that because MitoQ is not something that kind of gets into your body instantaneously and builds up in all your organs instantaneously, you should wait at least 2 to 3 months to start seeing effects. So as I said, some studies have shown that MitoQ can improve exercise performance in 10 days. But for things like the brain, we think that accumulation of MitoQ in the brain takes longer. So if you're taking it for anything brain related, it might take 2 to 3 months to start to see the effects.
Okay, so it builds up over time.
Yeah.
Does it, I mean, does it get used up? I mean, does it have like a half-life
Yeah, it has
or
a half-life.
does it get
Mhm.
cycled?
Oh yeah, it gets cycled out. So what's been shown through human studies and also animal studies is that it can accumulate in various organs, but then it plateaus and it doesn't accumulate past that sort of level. And then we also have measured MitoQ getting excreted out, in a sort of systematic way so that most of it is out of your system after a few weeks. So yeah, it's not staying around forever. It's definitely getting excreted out. And this is where, yeah, I would say this makes sense because we all know that mitochondria turn over. And once mitochondria turn over, then the MitoQ just gets taken out of the system.
Any particular age when you should start? Or who would this be beneficial for? Is
Yeah,
it
good
everyone?
question.
Any
Yeah,
contraindications?
no contraindications that we're aware of. So we know we've been asked about, whether you can take it with blood thinners, and you can, and whether you can take it with other supplements. And in fact, we encourage that. We think that, nothing is a silver bullet. you are always going to need lots of different ways to address not only your mitochondrial health, but other health of other parts of your body. So we don't have any contraindications in that way. In terms of the age to start taking it, well, I always try to tell people you're aging sooner than you think, right? So VO2 max starts going down in your 20s, and that's a sign that your mitochondria are starting to have age-related effects, right? So be aware. And same thing with your brain. People aren't aware, or at least they don't always think about the fact that a lot of aspects of cognition, especially around reaction time and fluid intelligence, peak in your 20s and start to go down in your 30s. And so that is all a sign to me that your mitochondria, even at these really early stages where you think everything is fine, could need some support. So I would say for sure, start taking MitoQ in your 30s. Maybe not like a huge amount, but definitely something. And then especially people who know they have any kind of, health issues. I especially encourage this with people who know that they have heart issues in the family, for instance. That makes a lot of sense. The other area of people that I really try to sort of tell, like think about taking this earlier is athletes. So people who are really trying to up their exercise game. MitoQ is clearly shown to be very good at helping with performance and helping with, peak power and things like that and recovery. So that's another group that, as I said, we have professional cyclists that are kind of swearing by it. Lastly, this is kind of interesting. The other area that I would love people to be aware of is that if you're not a usual exerciser, if this is something hard for you because it feels horrible when you start and all the rest, we have some data showing that, for instance, that flow-mediated dilation, that ability to have your vasculature respond to nitric oxide, if you're sedentary, this is actually quite poor. So you don't respond very well to nitric oxide, and you don't have that kind of vascular sort of dilation that you should when you start exercising. But MitoQ seems to help with that. So if you haven't exercised for a while and you want something to maybe help you boost up that feeling of having more energy, having more kind of power as you exercise, MitoQ might be very helpful for that because it seems to be especially good for bringing sedentary patients back up to that kind of vasodilation and blood flow that they need to get the job done.
To get you started. Yes.
To get you started, exactly. Yeah.
You also, as I recall, you also said that it increased PGC1 alpha. So
yes.
Hopefully it's improving the performance of the existing mitochondria, but also helping biogenesis.
Yeah, that's why we think that people are having that extra power, that improved performance is we're increasing biogenesis. But just, yeah, we haven't quite had that definitive data, but PGC1 alpha does seem to indicate that that's probably going on.
You did mention that it could be combined with other supplements. Any recommendations, any thoughts on what kind of supplements, or is that too wide?
No, I mean, I have my favorites. So I am particularly excited about MitoQ combined with curcumin. In fact, we have a product called MitoQ plus curcumin because there's been several studies. These are preclinical studies showing that MitoQ plus curcumin are synergistic in Alzheimer's pathology. This is in an Alzheimer's mouse model. So that's kind of interesting. We think that MitoQ will be especially good with NAD boosters, so NMN, NR makes sense because there's different ways to improve mitochondrial function, and surely NAD is a different pathway that could be improved, and then oxidative stress is another pathway that we think is improved best by MitoQ. Ergothioneine is one that we're kind of excited by. This is something that I don't know if people are as aware of as a supplement. It's actually a very potent mitochondrial antioxidant as well, but it's a sulfide antioxidant. So it's a little bit slightly different. And we are starting to see, we haven't published this yet, we're starting to see good synergy with ergothioneine as well too. And I think you're probably aware that ergothioneine is thought of as a longevity vitamin, for instance, that it seems to correlate with better cognition and better muscle function and things like that. So yeah, it makes sense that it would combine well with MitoQ.
Excellent. So where do you see kind of the future of MitoQ going? I mean, at the moment you have the base product, and then you have some combinations with other things like curcumin, as you mentioned. But yeah, where do you see the future in terms of the studies or the company?
Yeah, so we have different things that we're looking at. One is that, as you say, we have MitoQ combined with other things to sort of help, address certain sort of organ issues, things like that. But we are now starting to make products that don't have MitoQ at all in it. So, for instance, I have done a lot of work on fish oil in my previous positions, and I'm a total believer that we should all be taking fish oil also from a very early age. So we are now selling a fish oil product that has really high EPA, which I think you're probably aware of is now being looked at as maybe a much more beneficial brain type of omega-3. So very good for depression and sort of mood and also cognition. And also, some aspects of heart function as well. The other area that I think MitoQ is really going into is, I would say, just all sorts of different ways that you can improve cellular health. So we know mitochondria are very important, but we're also really interested in looking at other ways to improve, the different hallmarks of aging, for instance, so senescence and, epigenetics and all the rest. So that's another area that we're really excited by. So I think we're really just excited by understanding how to equip people to know what their sort of health trajectory is at the earliest and making them feel empowered to do something about it. So not just waiting around for disease to happen to them or aging to happen to them, but feeling super proactive about it because they have things that they understand about, the science of Healthspan that we can provide to them.
So, where can people go for further information? So we mentioned like a couple of websites in there. So just to kind of recap, we've your company
Yeah, for
website
sure.
and then the MCRP one.
Yeah, so the mitoq.com website, so mitoq.com is great for just learning about MitoQ. And as I said, we keep a lot of studies there and sort of scientific advice, and we have blogs. And you can also purchase MitoQ and other products there as well, like the fish oil product I just told you about. I also very much encourage anyone who's interested in research or just understanding in depth about mitochondrial research to go to mcrp.dev. And that's our mitochondrial collaborative research program where you'll learn how to sign up to get free MitoQ to do research. We try to make it really easy. We're excited by pretty much everything that people come to us about. We just had someone come to us about stroke rehabilitation, and we're excited by that. We have many different interests, so I'm sure we'll be excited by your proposal as well, too.
Okay, great. Dr. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been lovely. And yeah, and just so if anyone wants to contact me too, they can contact me at smitchell@mitoq.com if they've got any other questions, because I love talking science. This is what I'm really about. So I'm really pleased that you reached out. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.